The alien race, known as the Zephyrians, had always been a peaceful people. They lived on a beautiful planet far from Earth, in a system surrounded by stars and nebulae. The Zephyrians had long believed that their technology was advanced enough to protect them from any threat that could come their way. But they were wrong. The Ravagers, a ruthless and war-hungry race, appeared out of nowhere and began their campaign of destruction. The Zephyrians had never seen such savagery. It was a war unlike anything they had ever faced before. The Ravagers attacked without warning, tearing through the Zephyrians' defenses and laying waste to their cities. The Zephyrians tried everything to fight back. Their weapons were powerful, but the Ravagers were stronger and faster. Every day that passed, more and more of their world was destroyed. The Zephyrians could not hold on much longer. In their desperation, they sent out a message, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would hear it. The message was clear. They were in need of help. They needed a force that could stand up to the Ravagers and end the destruction before their entire species was wiped out. The message was sent into the stars, hoping it would reach a distant civilization that might have the power to help them. At first, there was nothing. The stars were silent. No one responded. The Zephyrians, now on the brink of extinction, feared that their call had fallen on deaf ears, but they did not give up. They continued to broadcast the message, sending it out over and over again, hoping that one day someone would hear it. In the vastness of space, it was impossible to know if their message had been received, but they had no other choice. They had to try. Far across the galaxy, in a command center on Earth, Captain Clara Reynolds sat in front of a large screen, staring at the incoming message. She had never seen anything like it. The message was faint, but its urgency was unmistakable. As a senior officer in Earth's Space Defense Fleet, she had heard many distress signals before, but this one was different. There was something about it that called to her. The words on the screen were simple, but the desperation in them was clear. "Help us. We are being attacked. The Ravagers are destroying everything." Clara stared at the message for a long moment, her mind racing. The Ravagers were a name she had heard before. They were known throughout the galaxy as a vicious and merciless race. Earth had never directly encountered them, but their reputation had spread far and wide. Clara knew that if the Zephyrians were calling for help, things must be dire. She quickly tapped a few buttons on the console and brought up a map of the galaxy. She traced the line from Earth's position to the Zephyrians' home system. It was a long distance, but Earth's ships were capable of traveling vast distances in a short time. Still, Clara knew that time was running out for the Zephyrians. The Ravagers had already attacked their world. There was no telling how much longer the Zephyrians could hold on. Clara knew what she had to do. She stood up and made her way to the command center, where Admiral Luke Carter was already waiting for her. Admiral Carter was the leader of Earth's defense fleet, a man with decades of experience in military strategy and leadership. He had seen countless battles, and his wisdom was respected across the galaxy. Clara briefed him on the message, and the urgency in her voice was clear. "The Zephyrians need our help," she said. "Their world is being destroyed by the Ravagers. We have to send a fleet to help them. We can't ignore this." Admiral Carter looked at the screen, his face hardening. "I know," he said simply. "Prepare the fleet. We'll mobilize immediately." Clara nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She knew that Earth had the firepower to stop the Ravagers. The Earth fleet was unlike any other, equipped with Dreadnoughts, massive ships armed with weapons that could tear through entire fleets. The ships were the pride of Earth's military, and Clara knew that they were their best chance at winning this war. The decision was made. Clara and Admiral Carter began preparing the fleet. They worked quickly, knowing that time was running out for the Zephyrians. As the preparations began, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than they could have imagined. But there was no turning back now. The Zephyrians had called for help, and Earth was going to answer. The Earth fleet began its preparations immediately. Time was against them, and every moment counted. Clara and Admiral Carter knew that they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The Zephyrians were depending on them. The Dreadnoughts, colossal ships with armor that could resist the harshest attacks, were their best weapon. These ships were known across the galaxy for their firepower and size. They were built for war and were unlike anything else in space. The crew members who served on them were highly trained and ready for any battle. It wasn't just the size of the ships that made them powerful. It was the people who commanded them. Clara had served in space defense for years and had gained the respect of her fellow officers and crew members. Her calm demeanor and sharp mind had earned her a reputation as a leader who could be trusted in the most dangerous situations. Admiral Carter, with decades of experience, was the one who led the fleet. He had seen his fair share of battles and was known for making tough decisions. His presence alone was enough to inspire confidence in his crew. As the fleet assembled in Earth's orbit, Clara and Admiral Carter made their way to the command center. The room was filled with officers, technicians, and strategists who worked tirelessly to ensure that the fleet would be ready for their journey across the stars. Clara stood next to Admiral Carter as they reviewed the final preparations. The dreadnoughts were being loaded with supplies, weapons, and personnel. Every detail had to be perfect. The fleet would have to travel through unknown and hostile space, and the risk of encountering the Ravagers was high. The mission was dangerous, but Earth had no choice but to respond. As Clara watched the activity in the command center, her mind raced. The fate of the Zephyrians rested on their shoulders. If they failed, the alien race would be lost forever. Clara had no intention of letting that happen. She had been a part of many missions before, but none quite like this. She knew that they were heading into the unknown. No one could predict what awaited them on the journey ahead. Admiral Carter approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll do this," he said. "Earth has never backed down from a fight, and we're not starting now." Clara nodded. The words were simple, but powerful. The fleet would leave in a few hours. There was no time for second-guessing. As they prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the crews of the dreadnoughts gathered on their ships. Each crew member was given a final briefing, and then they took their positions. The dreadnoughts slowly lifted off the ground and into the vastness of space. The engines roared to life as they made their way toward the Zephyrians' home system. The journey would take several days, but the crew members were determined. They knew what was at stake. As they traveled through space, Clara and Admiral Carter communicated frequently. They discussed strategies, potential threats, and how they would handle any situation that might arise. The crew members on board the dreadnoughts were highly trained, but the Ravagers were a different kind of enemy. They were unpredictable and merciless. The crew needed to be ready for anything. Days passed, and the fleet continued its journey across the galaxy. The crew members worked tirelessly to keep the ships in top condition. The dreadnoughts' weapons were checked and rechecked, and the communication systems were fine-tuned. Clara's thoughts never strayed far from the Zephyrians. She knew that every moment counted. The Ravagers were closing in, and the Zephyrians' world could be destroyed at any time. As they neared the Zephyrians' home system, Clara could feel the tension rising. Every officer, every crew member was on edge. The unknown loomed ahead. The fleet was ready for battle, but none of them knew what to expect. As they reached the outskirts of the Zephyrian system, the fleet stopped. They had received a transmission from the Zephyrians, a signal that confirmed their worst fears. The Ravagers were already there. The message was brief but chilling. "The Ravagers are here. Our defenses have fallen. We are all that remains." Clara's heart sank as she heard the message. The time for preparation was over. The dreadnoughts moved into position, their massive forms looming over the empty space. Clara watched as the ships prepared for battle. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was no longer just a mission to save an ally. This was a fight for survival. The Ravagers were here, and they would not stop until they had destroyed everything in their path. Admiral Carter stood beside Clara, his face grim. "It's time," he said. "Let's end this." The fleet moved into position, the dreadnoughts taking their places in a tight formation. The first wave of Ravager ships appeared on the horizon. They were massive and intimidating, with dark hulls and weapons that glowed ominously. The dreadnoughts' weapon systems powered up, and the crew members took their positions. Clara stood at the command center of the flagship, watching the battle unfold on the screens in front of her. She could see the Ravager ships firing their weapons, sending blasts of energy toward the Earth ships. The dreadnoughts returned fire, their weapons firing in unison, sending massive blasts of energy toward the enemy. The battle was fierce. The Ravagers fought with everything they had, but the Dreadnoughts were stronger. The massive ships fired their weapons with deadly precision, tearing through the Ravager ships one by one. Clara could hear the cheers from the crew as the first wave of Ravagers was destroyed, but she knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more waves, and the Ravagers were relentless. The Dreadnoughts pushed forward, their weapons blazing. Clara's mind was focused. She had trained for battles like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the scale of this fight. The fate of the Zephyrians and, possibly the entire galaxy, was at stake. The Ravagers would not stop, but neither would Earth. The battle had only just begun. Clara stood at the command center of the flagship, watching the chaos unfold before her. The Ravagers, though ruthless and unforgiving, were no match for Earth's dreadnoughts. The massive ships fired their weapons in perfect harmony, each blast shaking the space around them. As the first wave of Ravager ships was destroyed, the crew cheered, but Clara knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Ravagers were relentless. They would not give up that easily. The fleet pressed forward, the dreadnoughts cutting through the enemy ships with deadly precision. Commander Ava Mitchell, who had been coordinating the battle from the bridge of the Titan, gave orders to keep the pressure on the Ravagers. The fleet moved as one, their formations tight and coordinated. The Ravagers tried to regroup, but the dreadnoughts were faster and stronger. Clara watched as the Ravager ships attempted to break through the formation, but Earth's ships held firm. The battle raged on for hours, with explosions lighting up the dark void of space. The crew worked tirelessly, maintaining their focus and determination, but the Ravagers were not going to give up. They sent wave after wave of ships, hoping to overwhelm the dreadnoughts with sheer numbers. Clara knew that the key to winning this battle was not just brute strength, but strategy. She needed to outsmart the Ravagers. She knew that if they could break the Ravagers' line, they would be able to take out their command ship, which would cripple the enemy's coordination. Clara issued the order to break formation and go on the offensive. The dreadnoughts split into smaller groups, each one targeting a specific Ravager ship. The move caught the Ravagers off guard, and for a moment their forces were in disarray. Clara could see the advantage they had gained. Commander Mitchell and the rest of the fleet followed Clara's lead, pushing the attack further into the Ravager formation. The battle continued for hours, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But it was clear that the tide was turning in Earth's favor. Clara could see the desperation in the Ravagers' movements. They had never faced an enemy like Earth's dreadnoughts. The Ravagers tried to regroup, but it was too late. Clara and Admiral Carter were not going to let up. With the Ravagers' fleet in disarray, they pressed the attack with even more force. The battle had become a slaughter. The Ravagers were being torn apart by the Earth fleet's weapons, and their ships were being destroyed faster than they could react. But even as victory seemed certain, Clara knew that the battle was far from over. The Ravagers had a secret weapon. Clara had heard rumors of a weapon they had developed, something powerful enough to turn the tide of the battle. She didn't know what it was, but she had a sinking feeling that it was about to make an appearance. As the battle raged on, Clara's worst fears were realized. A massive Ravager ship appeared on the horizon, its hull dark and menacing. It was unlike anything Clara had ever seen. The ship was far larger than any of the Ravager ships they had already encountered. It was a superweep, built for one purpose: to destroy everything in its path. The massive ship fired its weapons, sending waves of energy that cut through space like a knife. The dreadnoughts returned fire, but the superweapon's shields were too strong. The Ravager ship fired again, and this time it struck the Vanguard, Clara's flagship. The blast sent the ship reeling, shaking the crew to their core. Clara could hear the alarms blaring as the ship was rocked by the blast. She gritted her teeth, refusing to give in to the panic that threatened to overtake her. She quickly ordered the crew to assess the damage and prepare for a counterattack. Admiral Carter's voice came through the comms, calm but stern. "We've got to take that ship down, no matter what it takes." Clara knew that Admiral Carter was right. This was the turning point of the battle. If they didn't destroy that superweapon, they would lose everything. Clara's mind raced as she tried to think of a plan. The Ravager ship was too powerful for them to fight head-on. They would need to use their speed and agility to get close enough to disable the super weapon's defenses. But time was running out. The Ravager ship fired again, and this time it destroyed one of the dreadnoughts. The crew members on board were lost, and Clara felt a wave of anger and sorrow wash over her. She couldn't let more lives be lost. She couldn't let the Zephyrians' world fall. Clara ordered the fleet to focus all of their firepower on the super weapon. The dreadnoughts opened fire, their weapons unleashing a barrage of energy at the massive ship. The super weapon's shields flickered, but they held strong. Clara watched as the battle unfolded on the screens. Her mind was sharp, her focus unwavering. She knew that they needed to take down the super weapon's shields if they had any hope of surviving. But how could they do it? She needed a way to get close without being destroyed first. Clara turned to her crew, a determined look on her face. Prepare for a daring maneuver. We're going to take the fight to them. She quickly issued orders to Commander Mitchell, who immediately began to implement the plan. The dreadnoughts split into smaller groups again, each group taking a different approach. The idea was to confuse the Ravagers, forcing them to spread their defenses thin. As the dreadnoughts moved into position, Clara felt her heart racing. The tension was palpable. This was it. This was their chance. The dreadnoughts closed in on the super weapon. The Ravagers fired relentlessly, trying to take out the attacking ships, but the Earth fleet was too fast. The dreadnoughts weaved through the barrage, using their agility to their advantage. Finally, Clara saw the opening she had been waiting for. One of the super weapon's turrets was exposed. Clara gave the order. The dreadnoughts fired everything they had at the exposed turret. The weapon exploded in a flash of light, and the super weapon's shields faltered. It was a moment of hope. Clara's crew cheered as the first crack appeared in the Ravager ship's defenses. But the battle was far from over. The Ravagers would fight until the very end, but Earth had the advantage now, and they weren't about to back down. The battle between Earth's dreadnoughts and the Ravagers raged on. The momentum had shifted in Earth's favor, but the Ravagers were not going down without a fight. The massive super weapon that had once seemed invincible was now struggling to hold its ground. Against the relentless barrage from the Earth fleet, Clara stood at the command center of the flagship, watching the enemy's ships slowly falter. Her mind was focused, calculating each move as the battle unfolded in front of her. There was no time to relax. The Ravagers were still a serious threat, and the super weapon was not done yet. Clara knew that they had to finish the job quickly before the Ravagers could regroup. She watched as the dreadnoughts moved in on the super weapon, their weapons firing with precision, tearing apart the remaining defenses. The Ravager ship fired back, but its once mighty shields were no longer as effective. It was clear that Earth had the upper hand now. Clara's pulse quickened as the Ravager ship began to break apart. This was their chance to end the battle once and for all. She issued the order to focus all firepower on the super weapon's core. The dreadnoughts shifted their formation, bringing their weapons to bear on the heart of the Ravager ship. With a deafening explosion, the core of the super weapon imploded, sending shockwaves through space. The Ravager ship's hull cracked open, and the once unstoppable weapon was no more. Clara felt a sense of relief wash over her. The battle was almost over, but there was no time to celebrate. The Ravagers still had more ships, and they weren't going down without a final push. A new wave of Ravager ships appeared on the horizon, massive and threatening. These were their last-ditch forces, and they came at the dreadnoughts with everything they had. Clara's heart pounded as she saw the enemy ships closing in. She couldn't let them win now. Not after everything they had fought for. The crew on the flagship was tense, awaiting her orders. Clara stood tall, her voice steady. Hold the line. No retreat. The dreadnoughts moved into formation, their massive weapons charging up. The final battle had begun. The Ravagers fired their weapons, but the dreadnoughts were ready. The enemy ships swarmed around the Earth's fleet, but the dreadnoughts fired back with unrelenting force. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up space in every direction. Clara's hands gripped the armrests of her command chair as she watched the battle unfold. She knew that this was the moment that would decide everything. She could see the Ravagers' desperation, but she also saw their strength. They weren't giving up. They wanted to destroy Earth's fleet at all costs. It was clear that the Ravagers knew they were losing. Their once coordinated attack had turned into a chaotic frenzy, the ships breaking off into small groups and attacking in all directions. It was a last-ditch effort to make Earth pay for the damage they had caused. The Dreadnoughts moved as one, firing in perfect synchronization. The Ravager ships fell one by one, each explosion a testament to the power of Earth's fleet. But there were so many Ravager ships left. Clara knew that the final push would come soon, and it would be brutal. She couldn't afford to lose a single ship now. The battle felt endless, with no sign of the Ravagers relenting. But just as Clara began to fear that the fight might never end, the tide turned again. The Ravagers' final wave was finally faltering. Their ships were being torn apart faster than they could regroup. Clara watched with bated breath as the last Ravager's ships were destroyed. Then, as the final blast rang out, the battlefield fell silent. The Earth fleet had won. The Ravagers were defeated. Clara exhaled deeply, relief flooding her body. She had led her crew through the toughest battle of their lives, and they had emerged victorious. But there was no time to rest. Clara knew that their mission wasn't over yet. The Zephyrians were still in danger, and they had to make sure that the Ravagers were fully driven away from their world. Clara turned to Admiral Carter, who had been by her side throughout the battle. He gave her a brief nod. They both knew what had to be done. The Earth fleet moved into the Zephyrian system, where the alien world lay in ruins. The Ravagers had left nothing but destruction behind. The Zephyrians, once a proud and peaceful species, had lost almost everything. Their cities were burned and their defenses were shattered. Clara could see the devastation on the monitors as the Dreadnoughts moved into position. She had led her crew to victory, but the cost had been high. Many Dreadnoughts had been lost, and countless lives had been sacrificed. Clara felt a deep sadness as she looked at the destroyed world. The Zephyrians had called for help, and Earth had answered. But the price of that help had been steep. As the Dreadnoughts moved into orbit around the Zephyrians' planet, Clara ordered the fleet to begin their recovery operation. The crew would salvage what they could and help rebuild what had been lost. It wasn't enough to simply win the battle. They had to help the Zephyrians rebuild their civilization. Clara knew that Earth couldn't stand by and do nothing now. The Zephyrians were their allies, and it was their duty to help them rise again. The Earth's fleet began to send down supplies and medical teams to the surface of the planet. Slowly but surely, they began to repair what had been broken. The ravages of war were everywhere, but Clara felt hope beginning to rise. The Zephyrians had been saved, but their future would depend on what they did next. Clara's eyes fell on the communications screen, where a Zephyrian representative appeared. The alien was weak and broken, but there was a flicker of gratitude in their eyes. "Thank you," the Zephyrian said softly. "We never thought anyone would come, but you did. You saved us." Clara nodded, her voice steady. "We won the battle together. Now, we will help you rebuild. You are not alone." The Zephyrians would need time to recover, but Clara knew that Earth had done the right thing. The battle had been hard, but the victory was worth it. As the Earth fleet moved to assist the Zephyrians, Clara looked out into the vastness of space. The war was over, but the work had only just begun. The future was uncertain, but Clara knew that Earth would always be there to stand with its allies. They had shown the galaxy that Earth was not a force to be taken lightly. No one would forget the day the Dreadnoughts darkened the skies. The battle was over, but the fight for peace would continue. The aftermath of the battle was quiet. The Earth fleet had done their job, and the Ravagers were defeated. The fleet had left the Ravager ships scattered across the void of space, their weapons disabled, and their massive forms floating like broken husks. But the fight was far from over. Clara had led her crew to victory, but she knew that the true work was just beginning. The Zephyrians were safe for now, but their world was in ruins. Cities were burned to the ground, and their defenses were shattered. Clara couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility that had fallen on her shoulders. The Earth fleet had answered the call, but now they had to help rebuild what had been destroyed. It wasn't just about military victory anymore. It was about helping a people who had lost so much. Clara stood in the command center of the flagship, looking at the damage reports that were flooding the screens. The Earth fleet had taken heavy losses, but the mission had been a success. Commander Ava Mitchell, standing beside her, was going over the reports, her face grim. "We've lost 5 dreadnoughts," Mitchell said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And a third of our crew," Clara nodded, her expression hardening. The cost had been steep, but they had achieved what they set out to do. The Ravagers had been stopped, and the Zephyrians had been saved. That was all that mattered. The silence in the command center was broken by Admiral Carter's voice. "Clara, we need to start thinking about the next steps. The Ravagers may be defeated, but there are still threats out there." Clara turned to face him, her brow furrowing. She knew that Admiral Carter was right. The galaxy was vast, and the Ravagers were not the only danger lurking in the darkness. There would always be another enemy, another fight to fight. But for now, she had to focus on the Zephyrians. They were in desperate need of help, and Earth couldn't afford to abandon them. Clara turned to the crew, who were working diligently to prepare the fleet for the next phase of the mission. She issued the orders to begin the recovery operation. The dreadnoughts would continue to patrol the system, while teams of engineers and medical personnel were sent down to the surface of the Zephyrians' planet. The Earth fleet would assist with rebuilding their cities, repairing their infrastructure, and offering medical aid to those who had survived. Clara knew that it would take time, but Earth had the resources and the will to see it through. As the days passed, the Earth fleet's efforts to help the Zephyrians continued. Teams of engineers worked on rebuilding the cities that had been destroyed by the Ravagers. Medical teams treated the wounded, providing the care that the Zephyrians so desperately needed. The Earth fleet's presence had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there were those who would answer the call for help. But Clara knew that this wasn't the end. The galaxy was vast, and there were many more worlds out there that needed assistance. The fight for peace wasn't over. As the weeks passed, Clara found herself looking to the stars once more. There were so many challenges ahead, so many unknowns. But Earth had proven that they were willing to fight, to sacrifice, and to help others. Clara knew that she would continue to lead the fleet, ensuring that the galaxy would be a safer place for everyone. The Zephyrians had been saved, and their world was slowly recovering. Clara had made a promise to them that Earth would always stand by their side, and she intended to keep that promise. She stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking out at the stars. The war was over, but the peace had only just begun. The dreadnoughts still patrolled the system, ensuring that no more enemies would threaten the Zephyrians. But Clara knew that there would always be more to do. There were always more battles to fight, more lives to protect. The future was uncertain, but as long as Earth had people like her, there would always be hope. Clara had seen the worst of what the galaxy had to offer, but she had also seen the best. The bravery and sacrifice of her crew, the kindness of the Zephyrians, and the unwavering resolve of Earth's fleet. Together, they had shown that there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The dreadnoughts had darkened the skies, but it was the hearts of the people that had truly won the battle. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes still fixed on the stars. The fight for peace had only just begun, but she was ready for whatever came next. And as the Earth fleet continued its mission to protect the galaxy, Clara knew that the legacy of this battle would live on. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about standing together, united in the face of adversity, showing that no matter how dark the sky may seem, there would always be those willing to rise above it. With that thought, Clara turned and walked away from the bridge, ready for whatever the future held. She knew that her journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning.